Hello and welcome back. We've reached the second part, or chapter 2, of the basic level in our series. In this chapter, we'll be building on the foundation that we started in chapter 1. We'll be looking at your Windows 7 user accounts. We'll talk about a solid and reliable method for putting a strong password policy in place for a real-world home PC user. We'll look at further securing the login process, talk about how to best manage email accounts, and review your Internet Explorer security-related settings. And then we'll look at the Windows 7 Home Group and Work Group features. There are two types of accounts allowed in Windows 7. One is Standard User and the other is Administrator. You should pay close attention to these two tiers of access and make sure that every user account you create has the appropriate designation and therefore the intended authority on your PC. In fact, there should not be more than one administrator level user on any PC. All others should be standard users, and the designated administrator should be responsible for making all modifications that require administrative access rights. So, what is a standard user? A standard user is a typical user on a PC that can run programs, browse the internet, or do just about anything they need to do. What the standard user is restricted from performing is any activity that makes global changes to the Windows operating system or directly affects other users. They also cannot reverse security changes that the administrator has put into place for them. The standard user is allowed to make most any change or tweak configurations that affect his or her specific environment. For instance, changing screen settings, desktop backgrounds, or running most all applications as that user. As soon as the standard user attempts to make a change that goes beyond their own specific environment, they will be blocked. The administrator has access to everything that can control what the standard user can access. Because this account is so powerful, it's very unwise to grant more than one user this authority, and the administrator should be someone that fully understands these concepts and the best practices when changing Windows configurations. You may find that because standard users can't perform certain activities, they come to you for assistance, which might be a bit annoying. This will depend on the programs they run and the habits they bring to the table. Although it's very tempting for you to grant them administrator access so you're not bothered in the future, all Windows security experts, including myself, warn against it. Remember that malware and other misbehaving applications will take action behind the scenes on your PC. One great way to stop them in their tracks is to have your users run in standard user mode, thus not granting the malware elevated access to your system as long as they are logged in. Now let's take a look at where we configure the user account type. Let's go over to the Start button, then we're going to come up to the Control panel. From the Control panel, we're going to look at User Accounts and Family Safety. And then from there, we're going to go ahead to User Accounts. This is the User Accounts main menu. Of course, there are many features and things that you can configure here. Right now you can see that the user named user, which is me, is logged in and that I do have administrator privileges. So from here we want to go ahead and take a look at changing the account type. From here you see that it brings up the user that's currently logged in or currently selected for this action, and then there's the different account types that I've mentioned before, standard user and administrator. So from here you can grant access to administrator or reduce access back to standard user for any given user. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this screen. Now back to the main user account menu, there are several things you can do. Obviously you can change the password for this current user, you can remove the password, and of course we never suggest that. Every user should have a password. Change the picture, not related to security. The account name, user in this case is my account name. I could change it in the future to whatever I need it to be. And the account type, which we just talked about. Here's where you can manage other accounts. If you're administrator, you have authority over all of the accounts that are on this PC, then we go ahead here and we can manage all of those accounts. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Okay, now let's dive into the subject that we all don't want to deal with, and that would be user passwords. User IDs and passwords present the weakest security link for most Windows PCs. Typically, users have very simple IDs and passwords, or passwords that could be easily guessed based on pet names, birth dates, and other such information, or they share their passwords with several other users. Whichever of these you may be guilty of, The point is that you're obviously concerned with security on your PC, which is why we're all here, right? So failing to implement sound password policies on your PC just circumvents most of the other great work we'll be doing in this system. While a great password gives you a high level of protection, the combination of a complex user ID and password is unbeatable. Both should be hard to guess, and of course, with emphasis on the password component. So there are really two main issues to consider regarding passwords. The first is, how do you make sure that the passwords you use aren't so simple that the bad guy can hack them? The second is, how do I remember all those passwords that I have to create in this world of Windows logins, application passwords, internet site passwords, and on and on? There are multiple ways to address these challenges. One is to do nothing and struggle with your passwords and continue to stay at risk. Another is to purchase and use a third-party software product or the built-in Windows credentials management system to manage your passwords. Or a third option is to come up with a personal system that helps you deal with these issues. Third-party solutions along with the Microsoft Windows Credentials Manager can be complex in how they operate, and you have to understand which applications and websites are designed to work with them and which are not. One example of how Windows uses its Credentials Manager is when you are logging on to an internet site and your internet browser asks you if you would like Windows to remember the password. Whenever you answer yes to allow Windows to remember your passwords, it's the Windows Credentials Manager that takes over and stores it safely on your computer. I highly recommend against ever answering yes to having any program or operating system remember your password to any important application or website. If someone has your Windows login password, they could also log into any of these other sites. The Windows Credentials Manager and other tools are built into Windows primarily for business use and are typically managed by trained IT professionals. While we're on the subject, let me show you how to get to the Windows Credentials Management tool. Okay, I'm going to go to the Start button. Then I'm going to go to Control Panel. Then I'm going to go back to User Accounts and Family Safety. And then I'm going to look for the Credential Manager. It's right here. Right now, there's nothing really listed here because this is a fresh out-of-the-box installation of Windows, so I haven't had it remember and probably wouldn't have it remember any passwords as my policy suggests. There's a Windows Vault icon right here, and that's basically the encrypted secure area where it stores all of the passwords you've asked it to remember. It shows the Windows credentials here, none right now because it's a fresh install. Certificate-based credentials, and that's a special type of credential that requires a certificate on both sides, on the client and the server side, to allow access. And then generic credentials. Again, most of this is more complex than the average user wants to deal with, mostly for business users and IT professionals. I'm going to go ahead and close this window now, and we'll move on. Okay, back to passwords. Let's lay out some hard and fast rules regarding passwords that everyone implementing this system should follow. Rule number 1. Do not share your PC password with others, especially if you have administrator access to your system. Even if the other user has no intention of doing harm, just simply having the elevated access while using the PC creates potential risk. Applications they run, actions they normally take, and our malware bad guys can do much more harm as administrator. Rule number 2. Use strong passwords. The term strong password refers to a password that is complex enough so that it's very unlikely that it could be guessed or hacked. You should know that there are applications being used by some out there that are specifically built for determining passwords. These brute force methods are thwarted by simply using a strong password. The term strong is subjective, and so determining what is strong enough depends on the system you are accessing. Many websites require a minimum number of characters, while most banks may require much longer passwords with numbers and other special characters. So in practice then, the bank would define a strong password differently than say Facebook or YouTube might. Rule number 3. Do not write your passwords down. As tempting as it may be to keep notes somewhere with your collection of passwords, it's a very bad idea, and especially not on a file stored on the PC. In the next couple of minutes, I'll be describing an option for a personal system for dealing with your passwords. You could use this specific method or a hybrid of it, whatever works best in your situation. Just make sure that you follow the basic rules. It will take personal commitment to learn a system like this, put it in place, and then change all your passwords to comply. I'm very familiar with that effort, trust me. But if you're concerned about security, you have no choice because using weak passwords, writing them down, or sharing them with others renders much of the other security measures somewhat meaningless. Let's define a couple of concepts first. One concept is that of a tiered password system. Following this method, we'll define 3 tiers of passwords that will meet most any password need. A password tier simply means that you start with simpler passwords and step up to higher complexity passwords for things where you store more important information. What tier definitions do is remove some of the guesswork from selecting a password. You simply apply the rules to make choosing passwords simpler and more consistent. So here's a basic 3-tier system. Tier 1 passwords should be used online or for local applications on your PC that you consider inconsequential. These apps or websites are completely unimportant to you and contain no personal information that could lead someone back to you or your family. Sometimes websites will force you to register so they can keep tabs on when you visit the site or allow you to personalize the page or just that your preferences can be saved. Tier 1 apps or websites should contain no further information about you, including your name, your birth date, or any other personal information that could lead back to you or your family. As a rule, Tier 1 passwords should contain at least 5 characters and at least 1 number. Tier 2 passwords could be used online for sites that may contain some personal information. These sites should not have information related to your street address, your home phone number, or any type of business or financial information. Some examples might be YouTube or MySpace or Facebook. Oh wait! So we were thinking that your YouTube, MySpace, or Facebook page don't contain specific information regarding your address, phone number, or business, right? Well, it shouldn't. And the first thing you should do, if it does, is pause this program, log into those sites, and remove any of the personal information that may be listed on them. Social networking sites are the #1 source used today by those with bad intent to seek out and locate potential victims. If you want to leave your real name because you want other trusted friends to find you, then you have to balance risk versus reward and decide what's prudent. But certainly, absolutely, and without question, you need to remove exact age, date of birth, address, phone numbers, or any other personal information. All of these pieces of personal information can be assembled by any teenager with a bit of know-how to find you. Now what about your kids' accounts? How much of their personal and identifying information is posted? This system is not about parenting, of course, but as a matter of sound security practice, you should log into these social networking sites using the kids' IDs and remove any personal information from being included in their profiles and pages. Okay, back to Tier 2 passwords. As a rule, Tier 2 passwords should contain at least 8 characters that do not spell out a common word or name, and at least 2 numbers. Tier 3 passwords would be used for any type of financial or business access, including banking, investment, insurance, etc. As a rule, any website that contains personal information that ties directly back to you or your family or contains any kind of business or financial information qualifies as Tier 3. Tier 3 passwords should contain at least 8 characters that do not spell out a common word or name, mixed case on at least 1 character, in other words uppercase or lowercase on at least 1 character, 2 or more numbers, and 1 or more special characters being asterisk, exclamation point, and so on. Another important part of developing a reliable password strategy that ties to the tiers that I've just covered is to set a password seed or seed word. For this example, a seed word is a base word that you can easily remember. It's like a root word. For example, auto is the root word for automobile. From that seed, you will add letters, numbers, or special characters to come up with your final password. The concept here is that once you've decided on your seed and you remember it, then recalling how you expanded it to make your final password is much simpler than remembering passwords that are all completely unrelated. Remember, oftentimes you have to change passwords because some systems require it every 60 or 90 days or every so often. Using the seed word system makes those decisions simpler. My strong recommendation is that you define 2 seed words. We will use passwords based on the seed word 1 for websites and applications that fit into Tier 1 or Tier 2 complexity requirements. You could also use seed 1 as a base to come up with passwords for any non-administrator user on your Windows 7 PC. Seed word number 2 would be for higher security needs. We will use passwords based on seed word 2 for websites and applications that require Tier 3 password complexity. This way, your important passwords are not based on any root or piece of your lower security passwords because they're based on different seed words. You could also use seed word 2 to come up with passwords for your administrative user login to your Windows 7 PC. Okay, let's use an example to make this a lot more clear. I know it's a bit confusing. Let's choose 2 seed words that you might easily remember. These should not reflect parts of your name, your wife or child's name, or your dog's name, or any other obvious component in your life. Of course, as you put this system into action in the real world, you would select different combinations than the examples I'm giving here. So, for seed word number 1, I'll choose space. For seed word number 2, I'll choose limo driver. Okay, now we have all 3 pieces in place for beginning to select more secure passwords for any situation. Number 1, we have our tiers defined for password complexity. Number 2, we understand the seed word concept, or at least we're getting there. And number 3, we've selected our 2 seed words. Let's plug this all into a real-world example. So let's go visit the not-important.com website. Of course, an example of a website that you visit that requires no security. Based on the Tier 1 definitions that we've already defined, this would be a Tier 1 type of password. Based on the seed word definitions, this would qualify as a seed word 1 type. So that means I simply use seed word 1 and expand it to meet Tier 1 complexity rules. So how about space 9? I simply took my seed word 1, which was space, and added a number, which is part of the complexity requirement. Since the website is inconsequential, there's no need to make it more difficult. Now I have my password for all such sites that I visit or use. Next, I'm creating a password on a website that does require that I enter my name or other non-financial information. That means that I need to choose a password that meets Tier 2 medium security rules, but I can still use seed word 1. So how about spaceships 92? In this example, I expand the seed into the larger word to meet the Tier 2 8-character length requirement. So I started with space, which was my seed 1. I had to make it 8 characters, so I made it spaceships. Then I removed the letter I so that it isn't a real word. Remember, none of the passwords should actually read out as real words. Finally, I added 2 numbers. Now I have my password for all such sites that I visit or use. Now I'm on my banking or financial website, which has all of my critical information, and I need to ensure my password is safe. That means I need to use a Tier 3 secure password. And I needed to use my seed word 2 and expand it to meet Tier 3 complexity rules. So, how about this one? Well, this says limo driver 31, although it's a little bit hard to read, which is the point. In this example, I did several things to add complexity while still maintaining a logical flow based on the seed word. The seed word being limo driver. I capitalized the letter O in the middle of the password because it's less obvious than the first letter. I replaced all of the I's with exclamation points. I removed the last letter E so that it isn't an actual vocabulary word, yet it phonetically still sounds the same. Then I followed it with 2 numbers of your choosing. Now I have my password for all such sites that I visit or use. When you look at that, it does seem hard to believe that started with limo driver, but actually after you type it a few times, it does look like limo driver, the number 31 after it. So it looks like limo driver, easier to remember and very hard, if not impossible, to hack. This seems difficult at first, but it really isn't. Once you commit your seed words to memory, and you stick with a philosophy such as replacing the letter I's with exclamation points, you're 90% of the way to being able to recall all passwords for all of your needs while also complying with a far stronger password policy to keep your information safe. If you think about it, you're probably doing very similar calculations in your head right now when trying to come up with passwords, but without any formal method or structure. Once you get this implemented, you'll see how much peace of mind it brings. What users of this system most often say is how much less they worry or hassle with password security once they implement a system. What I recommend is that you go back to the last few slides where I define seed words and tiers, print them out, and keep them handy as you develop your own system based on the rules. Okay, so since we've talked about passwords so much, I thought I'd do a real quick review of how to change a user password on the system. Okay, so follow with me here. We're going to go to the Start button, then we're going to go to Control Panel, and from Control Panel we're going to go to User Accounts and Family Safety, and then we're going to go finally to User Accounts. Now in this case, let's assume that you're managing a number of passwords and you're doing changes to some of the user accounts on your system. So I'm going to say Manage Another Account. That's going to take me to a screen that will list all of the accounts that are on your PC system. In this case, there's only a couple of accounts because it's a fresh install. But I'm assuming on your PC you'd see all the number of accounts that you've created in the past. So you go ahead and select the user from this list that you want to change the password for. And then you have to select Change the Password. And then that takes me to the Change User's Password screen. So you have to enter the current password, of course, the new password, which meets your new strong password policy, and then confirm the new password by typing it in again. You have a choice here to enter a password hint. I typically don't do it, but you can put a password hint into this field, which will show up in the event that you forget your password. It might remind you of what it is. I find that kind of risky because you put a password hint in there and then that starts to indicate what your password might be. In any case, it's useful for some. I don't use it. Maybe you will. Then you go ahead and click Change Password. Now I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to actually change the password, but that's just going through the steps that it takes to change a password for a user. All right, I'm going to click Cancel, and then I'm going to go ahead and close the Manage User Account page out, and that's all there is to it. Okay, that's it for the user ID and password component of the system. Next, we'll be talking about further securing the Windows login. I'll put up our friendly pause screen for a few seconds in case you want to take a break before moving on. See you in a bit. Okay, let's move ahead. Microsoft has a security feature known as Secure or Interactive Logon. Secure Logon forces you to hit the Control-Alt-Delete keys to bring up the login screen. Microsoft makes this feature available to stop known hacks that can circumvent your logon credentials. In some cases, malware running on your PC could log on without your authorization. The Control-Alt-Delete key combination is reserved by the operating system only for Windows, so malware or hackers cannot intercept this keystroke or take action using it. If the bad guy builds a screen that looks the same as the Windows logon screen to capture your password, then when you hit Control-Alt-Delete, Windows dumps it or any other program that's running and takes you to the actual login screen. That way, Windows knows for certain that you're on the physical keyboard attempting to log in. This small additional step in the login process will significantly improve security for such a very small change. I can't stress how important it is for you to use the Windows Secure Login method to ensure your system stays safe. Now let's run through how to activate this feature. I'm going to go over to the Start button. In the search window, I'm going to type NETPLWIZ, NetPL Wizard. You see the program shows up in the list, and I'm going to run it from here. Basically, this takes us to an advanced user account management screen. We're going to click on the Advanced tab, and now you see several options, and we're going to be focusing on the Secure Logon piece. Your option here is to require users to press Control-Alt-Delete. That's what we want to enable. So I'm going to select that checkbox, and then I'm going to click Apply. Now we've turned that feature on. Secure Logon is activated. Now when you reach the login screen, instead of seeing a list of user accounts to log in, you'll see a message that prompts you to hit the Control-Alt-Delete key sequence to get the login page. That's it for Secure Login. I'm going to go ahead and click OK and get back to the desktop. There's one more very important setting regarding password protection that we need to cover. This is to password protect your screensaver feature. The screensaver feature will take over your Windows PC and display an alternate screen activity after a specified time when no activity has occurred on your system. In other words, when your PC is running and you're not using it, after a specified number of minutes, Windows will either turn off the screen or place a graphic on the screen as a screensaver until you return. The screensaver function ties into a very important security feature. Obviously, when you're logged in and have full access to your files and information, you're most at risk. When you leave your PC logged in and unattended, even for just a few minutes, you leave it at great risk because you've basically given access to anyone without knowing your password. That's why it's critical to enable this screensaver feature and further to require your password when returning. This ensures your PC is always safe even if you forget to log off. Let's review how to find this feature and how to configure it properly. Just point your mouse to any spot on the desktop and do a right mouse click. Then select Personalize. Then find the screensaver feature and click on it. It's over here in the bottom right hand corner. You see that right now I have no screensaver feature selected. That's because this is a fresh install right out of the box. I'm going to go ahead and click on screensaver. Then we're going to come over to the screensaver drop-down box. You see right now none is selected. So I'm going to come to the drop-down box. I'm going to choose a screensaver graphic that we would like to see when our PC is not being used. There's many here. I'll just say blank. What blank does is blanks the screen. Next is the timeout to wait before starting the screensaver. This is very important because if you set this timeout to be too long, then you defeat the security purpose for it. I recommend that you do not allow your PC to go unattended without the screensaver for more than 10 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to 10 minutes. Now this is the most important part of the configuration. Make sure you select the On Resume Display Login Screen checkbox. I'm going to do that now. This makes sure that when anyone attempts to use the PC after 10 minutes, they must enter their password to gain access. Now I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now that feature's been enabled, if you look at the icon for the screensaver feature, you see that I have the blank screensaver function selected and that it's enabled. That's all it takes to ensure your PC is password protected at all times, even if you forget to log off. I highly recommend you configure your PC with the password protected screensaver. If you don't, then you place yourself at considerable risk by leaving your PC unattended and open to anyone, possibly for hours at a time. Now let's move ahead and take a couple of minutes to talk about email accounts. Today, email accounts are used for more than just a destination address for people to send mail to. On many websites, your login user ID is your email address. Many times when you sign up for a service or subscription on the internet, you have to supply an email address. Many sites will require a valid email address simply so that they can add you to their vast email marketing list. In fact, having your email on their mailing list for advertising or selling to other marketers is the #1 reason that you're asked to provide email addresses online today. For these reasons, and because you will eventually have email addresses on lists all over the internet, it's important from a security and identity perspective to consider what exposure exists and how to manage potential risk. Understand that there are vast networks of marketing and other tools out there on the internet that are sharing information based on accounts created and cross-referencing them in an attempt to come up with a profile about you. At the very least, these activities mean a lot of spam or junk mail cluttering up your email inbox. At the very worst, it might mean that a bad guy out there could gain enough personal information about you to target you in some fashion. One type of email account comes from your internet provider, whether it be cable, satellite, or phone company. These email addresses will come with the subscription package you purchased for internet access. We'll call this your primary email account. Another type is internet-based mail, such as Google Mail or Microsoft Hotmail, among many others. You may be wondering what the difference is between these email providers. Well, your Internet Service Provider, or ISP, email name is often reflective of your real name or account. Also, that email domain, for example, emailaddress@comcast.net, tells the recipient who you do business with, which presents a small risk of them connecting to your account, which contains important information that you keep with that trusted vendor. Remember that your satellite, cable, or phone company vendor has all your personal information on their systems. On the other hand, web-based email account providers such as Google or Microsoft will allow you to create an account without recording any personal information in the process. So if a bad guy wanted to learn more about you, nothing about this account or the email name would help him in their efforts. We recommend that you create at least 1 or 2 online email accounts using services like Google or Hotmail or other services that are completely anonymous. They should contain no personal information whatsoever in your profile, and the email name should not be related to you in any way. Once created, you can now use them by defining a simple tiered email approach similar but easier than the one we covered regarding passwords. The downside is that you now have to retrieve email from more than one email host every time you want to check your mail. This might be a benefit because once you implement this system and you start using public web-based email accounts for most of your unimportant internet needs, most spam coming from those won't be part of your primary email account inbox. There are ways to receive email from all of your accounts into one email client so that you aren't running around the web and around the different applications to multiple places to check your email. If you use Microsoft Outlook, for example, you can install the Windows Live Outlook connector and configure Outlook to include your new Hotmail or Google Mail account. Then all your mail comes to one place. The steps to accomplish this go beyond this tutorial, but if you go to the Microsoft.com site and search for Live Outlook Connector, you'll find the download. I've done it, and this is the example here. So let's talk about an example of a possible tiered email account strategy. Tier 1. A Tier 1 email account is used for inconsequential sites that are not important to you and contain no personal or financial information of any kind. One sample might be secureguy1@gmail.com. That's the Google email system. A Tier 2 email account could be used for sites that may contain some personal information such as shopping sites, but are not the most important sites such as banking or financial institutions. You might also use this email for acquaintances or others that are not close friends or family. A sample email might be secureguy9@hotmail.com. Note that Tier 1 and Tier 2 email addresses are very similar. The point here is to use a provider other than your primary email provider. The name is less important. Just don't use real information about you in any email address. Tier 3. A Tier 3 email account is used for sites that are important to you and do contain considerable personal information such as banking or financial institutions. This would also be the email that you share with close friends, family, or business associates. This is the email address provided by your internet service provider that you use for most trusted recipients. A sample email address might be mysecureemail@att.net. Note that with this more secure email address, the address selected should be different than the ones used for the less secure tiers. As with password policy implementation, there is considerable work involved in changing email addresses that are in your website profiles. I strongly recommend that you take the time and make the changes. Over time, you will receive emails from these sources that are addressed to your old email accounts, and that will remind you to go out and convert them. What you will notice over time is that you'll receive fewer spam messages on your primary Tier 3 email address. Remember, as we covered in PC Security 101, you should never open or click on any links contained in spam emails or unwanted email messages. This just confirms the email address is valid and begins the process of your email address being distributed all over the email spam world. Now let's talk about software updates for all of your third-party applications that have been installed on your PC. Earlier in the series we covered the Windows Update feature, and we made sure that we had properly configured it and then updated our Windows files. You should look at every other program that you've installed on your PC and research what update procedure is available for each. Most packages like Quicken or MS Money or even smaller plugins like Adobe Flash Player have the ability to stay up to date by contacting their home website and downloading updates to install on your PC. It's impossible for me to review each app on your system, of course, but nevertheless, this is an important component to the overall health and security of your PC. Many updates do resolve security threats that have been uncovered by the manufacturers. In addition, when Microsoft updates bring your PC current from the Windows 7 perspective, sometimes Windows components are used by other applications, so it's always important to keep everything up to date and in sync. To check, you should launch every program that you've installed on your PC and navigate through the available menu choices until you find something about program updates. Typically, updates will be located in the Setup, Configuration, or Help areas. Once you locate the update for each, see if you can select to automatically install updates as they become available. At the very least, configure each to notify you when updates are available, and make sure they all stay current. Internet Explorer is the built-in internet browser in Windows 7. You should be aware of a few basic concepts before making any changes to your Internet Explorer browser. One concept is temporary internet files. When you surf the internet, your browser saves much of the information you see and much that you may not see in a temporary directory. The reason IE saves this info is so that it will run much faster as you click around the net. There are banners and graphics and icons and other objects that repeat themselves from page to page. So saving them means that your PC doesn't have to download every screen component every time that you visit a page. IE will simply pull them down, which is much faster, to this temporary area on your hard drive. That's the good news. The bad news is that this temp area can grow large and might contain objects that are questionable. Certainly your antivirus program should catch such objects and probably will. It's just important for you to know this bucket of stuff is being saved on your drive at all times that you're on the internet. Another concept surrounds files called cookies. A cookie is a file that contains some information about a choice or an option specific to you for a website. When you log onto a site and notice that it, quote, remembers who you are the next time you go to that site, it's probably because it saved information in a cookie to your hard drive. Many other things are saved to cookies as well. In most cases, cookies help your internet experience go smoother, but sometimes you get a corrupted cookie or other problems with them which may cause a website to malfunction. There is a tool built into Internet Explorer that allows you to clean up the temporary file area as well as old cookies and other items that have been saved on your PC by the web browser. Let's take a quick look at how this tool works, where we can find it, and how to clean things up. I'm going to go down, I'm going to bring up the toolbar, and I'm going to click on the Internet Explorer icon. Now I'm going to go up to the Tools option on the menu bar, then I'm going to go to Internet Options. Then we're going to look here in the Browsing History section. One option you see is Delete Browsing History on Exit. So each time you use Internet Explorer, it maintains a history of all the sites you visit. You could go back several days and find sites that you visited. If you want to delete those every time you close Internet Explorer, you'd select this option. I like to have my history available, so I'm going to deselect it. I'm going to go ahead and click on Delete, and you see that there's a list of things here that it'll clean up. You see Preserve Favorites and Website Data. I'm going to deselect that because the point of this exercise is to clean up cookies and other temporary internet files. So I'm going to select Temporary Internet Files, my cookies, my history, then there's Form Data. I'm going to enable Form Data. Form Data is when you visit a website and you enter information into online forms. If you've ever noticed that sometimes you can go back to these sites and it will remember certain things that you placed in the fields, like your name or your phone number, your address. I'm going to go ahead and select that to be part of this cleanup. Passwords is another one. IE will remember passwords for some sites and some of the activities that you do while online, and I'm going to add that to the cleanup. And private filtering data. I'm going to go ahead and select this. This is information that's related to in-private sessions. In-private sessions is a feature in Windows 7 where you can browse the internet, and the internet browser doesn't save a lot of the information from your browsing section. But we want to clean everything up with this one command, so I've selected everything. Now I'm going to click the delete button. What it's going to do is it's going to go out there, it's going to delete the history and all those other items that we selected. Alright, so what we've done now is we've cleaned up all these temporary internet browsing sections, gotten rid of all that temporary data. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Take us back to the web browser. Now I'll go ahead and close it and we'll move on. Internet Explorer 8 has a number of vastly improved security measures built in to keep your PC protected from the myriad of threats you face when browsing the internet. For example, it now has an anti-phishing component within its smart screen filter technology. If you land on a dangerous site, IE will alert you with a warning screen in red notifying you that the website has been reported as dangerous. You might want to refer back to the PC 101 security section where we go through the phishing concept, what it is, and how to avoid it. Let's look at the smart screen choices. I'm going to go back to the toolbar. I'm going to launch Internet Explorer. Go up to the Tools menu, select Tools. Then I'm going to look at the Smart Screen Filter. Now there's a couple of options. One option is check this website. So what that'll do is that'll check this website at the Microsoft site. It's making sure that I want to check this and it's what I want to do because it contacts the Microsoft site and it may download some information relevant to this site. So I'll say OK. It says that Smart Screen Filter checked the website and didn't report any threats. So that means that no one has reported this site as a threat. Now, of course, this is google.com, so it's not going to find that kind of a threat on google.com, but that's the exercise. If you go to a website that you suspect might be problematic, then you can use this feature to see if anybody has reported it as a threat. All right, I'm going to go back to Tools, back to Smart Screen Filter options. There's another option called Turn Off Smart Screen Filter. I highly recommend that you leave Smart Screen Filter on. Turning it off would put your PC at risk. The last choice is Report Unsafe Website. Smart Filter will allow you to report back to Microsoft if you have a bad experience with a website, maybe you got a malware infection or some other activity that was unsafe in your opinion. You report it back to Microsoft and they'll investigate. If they do find that the website is unsafe, they'll add it to the list. And then when you do a check this website in the future, you and all other users using the Smart Screen technology will know that this is a bad website and to avoid it. I'm going to go ahead and close IE and move to the next section. Another feature is the pop-up blocker. Many sites will launch pop-up windows that you may not have requested. These are not only annoying, but may contain harmful links and content. By default, Internet Explorer will block pop-ups and warn you that the site is attempting to send you a pop-up by placing a flashing message at the top of the menu bar. You can then choose whether to allow or deny the pop-up. Let's look at the pop-up configuration choices. Again, back to Internet Explorer, back to the Tools option, and then we'll look at pop-up blocker. Very simple, two options. We have turn off pop-up blocker, which of course I recommend against. You should always leave it on. And then the settings for the pop-up blocker. If you look at the settings, we have several exceptions that can be listed. Exceptions are exceptions to the policy. That means that if you have a website that you trust and you want pop-ups to happen without having to answer yes, go ahead and allow it, then you can list those websites here. Internet Explorer will allow pop-ups from these sites without questioning them. You have a couple of options down here about what you want to happen when the notifications come for a pop-up block. One last point is the blocking level, which you see at the bottom of the dialog box. It's set to medium now, which is the default and how it comes out of the box when Windows 7 is installed. Medium is probably suitable for most pop-up blocking in terms of being secure, but you also have high and low as two options. Whenever you have this kind of tiered option, high, medium, and low, it really has a lot to do with the user acceptance and the annoyance that you might be willing to put up with. High is better from a security standpoint, but you certainly will be annoyed more often with pop-up blocks. So medium might be the level that brings the best balance between security and usability. Definitely don't set it to low. Low is a security risk. Really, that's about all there is to it. Now let's look at the main Internet Explorer security settings page. I'll go back up to Tools, then I'll look at Internet Options, and then we're going to click on the Security tab. So we have several zones here for which we can change security settings. We have the Internet zone, which speaks for itself. That's for when you're browsing the Internet. We have the local Internet. That's a local network and resources that you may have on your local network. We have trusted sites. These are sites that you have trusted and you have told Windows that you trust, so it doesn't apply the same level of security to these sites. And then you have the restricted sites. These are your sites that you know should be restricted because they're dangerous. Now let's look at the Internet zone. The Internet zone is for when you're browsing the open public Internet. And this is the security level by default that Windows 7 places on the Internet zone. It's medium to high. That's appropriate, and I think it's safe for most PCs. You could raise this if you choose to high, but it will warn you about some things maybe unnecessarily. If you want a safer internet experience, you can go ahead and set it to high, and then if you find that it's bothersome or annoying, you could come back to the medium-high setting. There's no harm in going higher in terms of security, just don't drop down to a less secure environment. Now I'm going to go over to the Advanced tab. The Advanced tab gives you all kinds of advanced user options for Internet Explorer configuration. I'm going to scroll down till I find the security area. denoted here with the little padlock. There are many things you can set here. I highly recommend leaving the defaults as it comes out of the box. These things are checked for a reason, and they need to be in place for you to be secure. I'm going to go ahead and say cancel, and then I'm going to close out of the Windows IE program. Internet Explorer is a robust and complex feature-rich application. There are a number of settings, as you've seen, that you can adjust, plugins that you can install, or modifications that you can make to it. As a result, you may have a situation where Internet Explorer is not functioning as expected, or you may have a malware problem that was resolved by a scan and a cleanup using your antivirus software, but you still may be noticing problems with Internet Explorer. There is a simple way to reset Internet Explorer back to its original installed state. Remember that you might lose a few things in order to reset things properly. Your browser history, your temporary internet files, cookies, stored passwords, and other such things may be deleted. Favorites, certificates, and most plugins and toolbars will remain intact. So I wanted to step you through this because there are times when Internet Explorer may not behave properly, and you try everything in the configuration you can to resolve it, but it just isn't doing what it's supposed to do. So a reset will usually solve most of those problems. Let me step you through resetting Internet Explorer in the event that you have one of these problems. First, you have to log into your PC with administrator privileges. Then you want to close any Internet or Windows Explorer sessions that you may be running. In fact, you want to close all the programs that you have running because you don't want any interference with this process. Then I'm going to go over and I'm going to select Internet Explorer from the toolbar. Once up and running, I'm going to go to the Tools menu and then down to Internet Options. Once in Internet Options, I'm going to click the Advanced tab. Now you see at the bottom, there's a Reset Internet Explorer section. It basically tells you what it's getting ready to do. Reset Internet Explorer setting back to their default condition. And that you should only use this if your browser is in an unstable state. Sometimes it is, and I've resolved that problem using this reset function in the past. I'm going to go ahead and click Reset. So now it says, are you sure you want to do this? And it lists the kinds of things that it will be deleting and resetting. Much of what we'd already talked about. You see that there's an option to delete personal settings. If you choose not to delete personal settings, and after the reset of IE, it's still acting up, then you may want to repeat this process, select Delete Personal Settings, and reset a little bit more deeply again. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and cancel this because I don't want to do a reset. And then I'm going to close Explorer. Okay, that covers all the important concepts and areas related to your Internet Explorer application. You should be able to browse the Internet safely now, as well as maintain Internet Explorer using some of the things you learned in this section. Now let's talk about features and configurations related to Windows networking and sharing things with other PCs on the network. One is the configuration of a workgroup, and the other is the built-in home group feature. I'll start with the workgroup configuration. Every Windows PC has several designations associated with it. From a file or network sharing perspective, there's the computer name, the computer workgroup, and the computer home group. The computer name is given at the time Windows 7 operating system was installed. The name is not really important, except the best practice says that you shouldn't name it using your actual family names or any personal information as always. The computer name may be broadcast across the network it's connected to, so to be sure that no one knows more than they need to about your PC, it's best to name the PC something general. Maybe by its location in the home or office, such as Office PC. Let's look at where the computer name is stored and how it can be changed. I'm going to go Start button, Computer, except I'm not going to click on it. I'm going to right mouse click on it and see what the options are. Go down to Properties. The property windows comes up and I'm going to say Advanced System Settings here over on the left window pane. Advanced System Properties comes up. I'm going to go over to the tab that says Computer Name, and then here we have options. I'm going to go ahead and click Change to rename this computer or change its domain or workgroup. Clicking Change, and now here the computer name is. We talked about the computer names. I called this one Windows 7 PC or Win7 PC. And then whether it's a member of a domain or a workgroup. A domain denotes a business type environment and is typically set by the IT manager in your area. Workgroup is for home PCs. The workgroup is a logical name given to a PC or group of PCs so that they can easily communicate with each other on a home or business network. The workgroup name is primarily used by Windows and other applications that may share information across your network to organize network resources in groups. For example, if you have 10 PCs on a network where 5 are part of workgroup name 1 and 5 are configured as workgroup name 2, then workgroup 1 PCs would always appear together as a group of network resources, while workgroup 2 PCs would be seen as a different group when running most networking tools or applications. Although you can share files and printers and other resources across workgroups, for a small home network it makes sense to configure all of your systems into one workgroup so your applications are simpler to use. When Windows 7 is installed, it automatically assigns the workgroup name of, well, you guessed it, workgroup. As with other default out-of-the-box names, best practice says that we should change the name to something else that isn't as obvious to an outsider. So let's go ahead and change the workgroup name. Again, this name could be anything, but shouldn't reflect your personal or family information. So I'm just going to say Home PC Group. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Then Windows 7 will go out in the background and do what it needs to do to make the change. You see the welcome message come up on the screen. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm warned that I must restart the PC to apply these changes. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go down here and say close. I'm going to go ahead and say restart now, and as always we'll pause the tutorial, come back as soon as the system comes back up and it's running. Now let's talk about the Windows 7 Home Group feature. Home groups are a logical group of PCs and shared resources that you create to make sharing simpler between multiple PCs on a network. It's actually a very user-friendly and powerful feature that once configured allows you to quickly see files, folders, photos, printers, and other resources on your network. When you create the home group, Windows will assign a password to it. This password is required to access the home group. The password cannot be changed and it's quite complex and hard to remember. In our opinion, this password protection, which is understandably required, is pretty much a showstopper when compared to the benefits of the home group feature. Windows 7 will allow you to share files, printers, and other network-connected devices without using home groups. Because it's a bit complex to configure and maintain, and because it does expose your personal information out to your home network, which could easily be part of a wireless network, I strongly suggest that to ensure the security of your files and the property stored on your PC, that you disable the home group feature. Most experts agree. The vast majority of simple home networks do very little sharing other than printer shares, so turning it off is not much of a loss. There are a number of ways to disable the home group feature, but the most certain way to make sure that it's inactive, and the way that's simplest to recover if you decide to turn it back on later, is to shut off the home group services. Home group services are Windows 7 programs that run behind the scenes and handle the home group features. Let's go ahead through the steps to shut them down. I'm going to go over to the Start button, and in the search field I'm going to type Services. When I do, several things pop up, but I'm going to go up to Services here and I'm going to select it. This is a list of all the services that are installed on your system. This is all the stuff that runs behind the scenes and makes your operating system work. I'm going to scroll down until I see the Home Group services. There's two here, Home Group Listener and Home Group Provider. I'm going to go ahead and open up by double-clicking on Home Group Listener. You see startup type is manual. I'm going to drop this list box down and I'm going to say Disabled. So basically I'm disabling that feature from the PC. If at any time in the future I want to turn the home group feature back on, I simply come back to this screen, I drop down this box, and I go back to manual setting. We're going to go ahead and disable it. I'm going to click OK, and then it disables it. Now the other service is Home Group Provider. I'm going to double click on that one, and I'm going to take the manual setting and turn it to disabled. I'm going to say OK. Now you notice a couple of things here. We've done the disabling in terms of the default setting, but these services are still started. They're still running. The status here says they're still running on our system. Let me show you why. I'm going to go back to the listener, and we're going to look at the service status, which is started. So we disabled it so that next time we start Windows, it will not be running. But right now, for this session, it's still started. I'll go ahead and stop it. There we go, it stopped. Now I'll say OK. Go to the provider. Do the very same thing. Stop the service. I want to go ahead and say OK. Now you see that both of them are disabled. I'll scroll over a little bit so you can see it. And they're not running. So effectively, by disabling those two services, we've turned the home group feature off. In the future, to re-enable them, just run these same commands, and for the startup type, change it from disabled to manual. That was the default. I'm going to go ahead and close the services window. So that pretty much covers everything in the basic level chapter 2. Let's take a quick look at what we covered in this very busy chapter. First, we reviewed types of user accounts and how to change them. That was the standard user and the administrator. We defined and developed a secure password policy. We enabled Windows Secure Logon. We defined and developed a secure email policy. We reviewed updates for all applications installed on your PC. We reviewed internet browser concepts. We reviewed internet browser security. We reviewed and secured computer and workgroup names. And we secured the home group feature. That's a lot. Feel free to review this chapter again and fill in the gaps in case you missed anything. See you in the next chapter.